Hello, everyone. Before we get into this podcast, we wanted to acknowledge something that we are all saddened by in the MMA community. And from this, I'll let Keelan take it over.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. First of all, everybody, very welcome to the episode. Very happy to be back. But before we get into today's episode, there's something sad that we wanted to acknowledge and give this man his rightful place. Last week, I think it was, we received the very sad news that Stephan Bonnar has unfortunately passed away. Those who know that without Stephan Bonnar, we would not have our sport as we know it today. We literally just would not have it. He might not have been the most glamorous fighter or the most well-known fighter, but he was one of the most beloved fighters. If you're too young to remember Stephan Bonnar, which a lot of our new fan base probably is, he was a real OG of the game, really, really good fighter. Featured on the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, which is what literally saved the UFC. Without The Ultimate Fighter, there is no UFC. There probably is no mainstream MMA. Stephan Bonnar and Forrest Griffin put on arguably, well, not even arguably, the one of the best fights that mixed martial arts has ever seen. Obviously, that was the finale of the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, and we all know the legendary stories from that. I think it was Spike TV. The UFC had a deal with back in the day where the UFC paid the network to be on the network as opposed to obviously the way it normally works. This fight's legendary. Both fighters are that good. They get a contract to fight in the UFC. Spike Network executives negotiate the new deal for the Ultimate Fighter in the parking lot after the event, and the UFC is born from there. Very sadly, Stephan Bonnar had a lot of public struggles with his health, both mental and physical. There's a lot of ugly scenes that unfortunately were played out in the public eye that never really should have been, but unfortunately they were. He had health troubles, he had legal troubles, and the only thing I can hope for is that now he is finally at rest and that his soul's at peace and that his mind's at peace. Stephan Bonnar, just wanted to wish you the best. You are literally one of the OGs, and I wouldn't have the sport that I love without you. So thank you for everything.
Rest in peace, Stephan Bonnar. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MMA Island podcast. I am Jack Kennedy alongside Keelan McNamara and Hunter Boss. Guys, another year of the MMA Island podcast. What's going on? We're keeping it going. 2022, it's over. It's basically over now, right? We're reviewing the world of MMA because we had a phenomenal year. I wouldn't say quite as good as 2021, but I would say 2022, if I had to describe it, it sets up like the trilogy of the UFC because I feel like 2023 has so many fights that have just spawned from the chaos of 2022 because that's what it was. This year was chaotic when it comes to MMA, and we're gonna break it down for you. These are our awards for the year in review 2022, one of our favorite podcasts. Let's go, guys. Okay, so first award on the table. I guess we can go ahead and start with this knockout of the year, right? Let's just go ahead and get right into it. Hunter, who has your knockout of the year for 2022?
Now, this whole list is personal. I
Yes.
thought there were a lot of fantastic knockouts this year, and a lot deserve credit. But I feel like the one of the most gnarliest and one of the coolest knockouts I've ever seen in my life happened this year, and it was through Michael Chandler knocking out Tony Ferguson cold with that front kick. I mean, it was something you would see out of UFC 4. I mean, he was front kicked and then out cold immediately
Yeah.
upon in impact and just fell down to the ground, slumped over. And then
Crumpled.
the camera instantly cuts to Michael Chandler doing 3 backflips in a row, and then, of course, cutting one of the coldest promos the UFC sees. There were a lot of fantastic knockouts, but this one takes the cake for me. Michael Chandler, you have done a great job this year.
Boys, we're kicking off the MMA Island Podcast Awards with a bang, or should I say a knockout. But that is a very good pick, Hunter. I like that a lot. For my pick for knockouts of the year, we are not going to the United States. We are going across the Atlantic Ocean, past my house to mainland Europe. And we're going to the city of love, ironically, because we're going to Paris. And we're going to the main event of UFC Paris, Cyril Gane versus Tai Tuivasa. Now, this could be in the award for fight of the year alone, but the
Yeah.
finish for me is knockout of the year. one of the wildest fights I've ever seen. Tai Tuivasa doing what he always does, FTA from the area, shout out him. But the finishing sequence from Cyril Gane was just phenomenal. Some of the body kicks he landed were absolutely sickening throughout the fight. Got Edson Barbosa, Dan Hooker flashbacks from them. If you know, you know.
Yeah.
But the finishing sequence was just phenomenal. He landed one devastating right hand and then a left that just put Tai Tuivasa on his back. Couple of hammer fists. The fight was over. Watch the finishing sequence if you can't remember it because it was sensational. Cyril Gane, knockout of the year.
Keelan, I'm glad you included that one because it wasn't on my list. I didn't think of it as knockout of the year, but it was beautiful and it deserves to be on that list. For me, guys, I'm probably gonna go with, I think, other than the Michael Chandler one, the most obvious one, and this is the knockout that changed the UFC or just shook up the MMA world, and that's Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman. Now, not only is this knockout amazing, right? Where it's just one of the best picture perfect technique wise head kicks you'll ever see. I mean, what you practice day to day, that is the head kicks that you saw Leon Edwards throw. From the techniques to setting it up to everything, it was perfect. But what makes this knockout of the year for me is that it won him UFC immortality and the welterweight champion, knocking out the guy Kamaru Usman, who's been rolling through everyone, improving in every fight. And on top of that, he does it after losing almost every round until the fifth in the last minute of the fight. Everyone's talked about this. It's one of the greatest moments, if not the greatest moment in MMA history. Knockout of the year for me has to be.
It's a good pick.
Okay, guys, let's move on. Submission of the year. Hunter, who has it for you?
I'm going for the new People's Champion, Zhang Weili, submitting
love it.
Esparza here. I mean, what more can you say? I feel like the boys around here on the podcast, we're not the biggest fans of Carla Esparza being champion at the time. And Zhang Weili came and conquered. I mean, she went in there and ragdolled her opponent anywhere the fight took place. On the feet, Carla Esparza immediately knew that she was in trouble. So they went to the ground, and Zhang Weili was obviously superior on the ground, ended up getting the rear naked choke, and honestly was just so satisfying to see Weili regain the belt. So just for that reason alone, I'm going Zhang Weili submission of the year.
Great pick, Hunter. Great pick. Like I said, I expect nothing less, of course, but a great pick. It's actually kind of funny when I think of 2022, and I could be very wrong about this, but I don't actually think of that many great submissions. There's not that many that I can actively remember.
Yeah.
Now, one that comes to mind as an honorable mention is Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler. It's not the most extravagant submission, but given the nature of the fight and so on, I thought that was a very good submission, a great way to end that fight. But I'm going to back Hunter on this, and I'm going to say Zhang Weili's submission of Carla Esparza, mostly because I couldn't think of anything else, but also because I do actually really like where his head's at with that. Look, let's be totally honest here. And look, I don't hold anything personal against fighters. I believe everybody deserves respect. Whoever steps in the cage, they've got a lot of balls to do it, irrespective. But Carla Esparza was not a popular champion. She won the title in a very poor fashion, controversial and poor. Nobody really wanted her as champion, and Zhang Weili absolutely ragdolled is not even the word. She beat her from pillar to post for as long as the fight lasted. Every wrestling exchange, she looked stronger. Every striking exchange, she looked like she was going to knock her into a different dimension. And the submission it was a very good technique. And to be honest with you, for a lot of fans, it was very satisfying for the reasons that we've mentioned. For me, I'm backing Hunter, and I'm going to say Zhang Weili submission of the year.
Yeah, I love that pick from you guys, and it's number 2 on my list. Keelan, I think it's interesting how you brought up the submissions weren't as spectacular as the years previous, but I feel like this is a year of more significant submissions and more crucial moments, as opposed to like you didn't see a twister this year. You didn't see anything just like crazy. A Ryan Hall 50-50 thing didn't really happen, but we saw some of the biggest moments defined by submissions that were just perfectly played out. And my submission of the year is less about actually getting the submission and more about how it was set up, which is the Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira. And Charles Oliveira, is one of the most decorated. He is the most, and statistically, the most decorated submission BJJ fighter in UFC history, right? Most submissions. And what Makachev did to him, we haven't seen in a long time since old Charles Oliveira. This is not the Charles Oliveira we know. And that's just because we found out just Islam Makachev is that guy. And we found that out because he landed that left hook. And for the first time in a long time, Charles Oliveira faced someone that was not afraid to go into his guard. And Makachev jumped in, got the arm triangle, and submitted Charles Oliveira. Was it the most flashy submission? No. But Charles Oliveira, no one goes to the ground with that guy because he's so good on the ground. And even I did not think Makachev would. I think I thought, it was a 50-50 fight. Anyone could win. But I did not think he would win by choking out Charles Oliveira, especially with an arm triangle of all things. It was crazy. So for me, submission of the year, Islam Makachev submitting the most decorated UFC fighter to date to win the belt in Abu Dhabi with all the pressure. That was an incredible moment. Islam for me.
Yeah, it's a very good pick. I like where you're coming from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, let's see. Where do we want to go to now? I say we go fight of the year, right? Let's move on fight of the year. Why not? Hunter, who has the fight of the year for you?
Fight of the year, not fighter of the year?
We're saving fighter of the year for last. We're going to make that the big one.
Okay, fight of the year.
Yeah.
This is a big one. I love this one.
Cool.
I don't think I'm going to be alone in saying this. I think it has to go to Yuri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira here. I mean, this fight had everything you could ever want in a fight. It had fantastic scrambles, great exchanges on the feet. Heart is shown in this fight. Comeback, tenacity. I mean, any adjective you would like to use to describe a fight probably happened in this fight. The first rounds were just unbelievably entertaining. Yuri Prochazka on the feet was just dominant and creative. But Glover Teixeira, you knew as soon as he went to the ground, was dangerous every single second of that fight. And in that last round, when the roles just kind of reverse and Yuri Prochazka is the one on the ground that's doing the damage, and Glover Teixeira is on the feet knocking people down and knocking Yuri Prochazka down, it just felt like one of the most entertaining fights from start to finish, and I thought was well deserving of the number one spot of fight of the year. So good, congratulations, Yuri Prochazka and Glover Teixeira.
Phenomenal. I really, really like that. My pick is very left field. In typical Keelan fashion, I suppose it's what it becomes sort of known for, and it's Carlos Esparza Rose Namajunas.
Yeah.
Look, that was actually on my list too, Keelan. That's a good pick.
Yeah. No. Oh no, wait, that was worst fight. Sorry, I got messed up. Sorry, I lied. No. My genuine fight of the year is left field, but you're really gonna like where I've gone with it, and I'm going to say that for me, for 2022, the MMA Island podcast fight of the year is a fight night. It's not even a pay-per-view. It is Kevin Holland versus Stephen Thompson.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason it's my fight of the year, there's obviously a lot I could have gone for. I could have gone Sean O'Malley, Petr Yan. I could have gone for Yuri Prochazka, Glover Teixeira. But I thought, you know what? Let's just go for something fun. And that's what that fight was. It was fun. It was refreshing. It was two guys who just wanted to stand and bang. Shout out Julian Lane. It was just two guys who wanted to just go at it. It wasn't wrestling. It wasn't smothering. It was just a good old-fashioned fan-friendly fight. And that's really what it was. And I loved every single second of it. It was the best Stephen Thompson I've seen since probably UFC 205, I would argue. Kevin Holland came out with a lot of credit. He stood and took everything Stephen Thompson could throw at him. And all around, it was just a barn burner. Brilliant fight. Brilliant, intimate crowd in Orlando as well. For me, perhaps not the most obvious fight of the year, but for sure one of the most fun.
Yeah, I really enjoy that pick. That's a good one. For me, Hunter, we're in agreement. I think it has to be Yuri versus Glover. For a lot of these other picks that I've been making, I've been using kind of these circumstances to help, prove why I chose them. The circumstances are there for this fight, but I don't even have to use them to describe how good of a fight this was. It was just, in my opinion, even if it was just an early prelim fight, this is the fight of the year. It went all 5 rounds, like Hunter was talking about. the story through the first 4 rounds is Yuri's dominating on the feet. There was no like really competence between each guy. Yuri was dominating on the feet through the first 4 rounds, and then Glover was dominating on the ground through the first 4 rounds. And then 5th round comes and it switches. And then Glover Teixeira is about to knock out Yuri Prohazka. And it's a 10-7 round, if we're being honest. He's on the ropes the entire time. It goes to the ground. Glover makes a mistake where I think he went for the takedown or something where he should have done it. He went for the guillotine, exactly.
And he slipped out.
He pulled the Dustin Poirier, and it didn't work out. And then he went to the ground, and Yuri Prohazka sinks in the choke, becomes champion with like 15 seconds to go. It has to be fight of the year. And not only fight of the year, it might be up there. It's definitely up there. It might have overtaken Alexander Gustafsson versus John Jones for the greatest light heavyweight fight in history, in my opinion. It's up there. It's at least up there. It's in the conversation. Unbelievable fight, and in my opinion, fight of the year. I agree with Hunter. So let's go ahead. Our next award, card of the year. There was so many, and I thought we had one on lock, but I'll see what you guys think. Hunter, what's card of the year?
I liked UFC 281 the best, I think. I think there were a lot of fantastic cards you could pick from this year. Though this may not have been the best year of fighting, we had some fantastic fights. Yeah. I mean, I think the only reason we say it wasn't the best year of fighting, there were a lot of injuries in main events. A lot of the cards this year, though, didn't have that happen. So there were a lot of fantastic cards. UFC 281 is one of them. You know, we had one of the bloodiest lightweight fights in Michael Chandler versus Dustin Poirier. One of the most shocking title fights we've ever seen with Israel Adesanya, Alex Pereira, and finishes literally all up to down on the card. I feel like there's only one or two unanimous decisions up in here. The rest were knockouts and submissions. And from the beginning of the early prelims, we had one of the most entertaining fights in a Mike Trizano versus Sangwoo Choi with the double knockdown and the insane haymakers just being thrown the entire fight. And then prelims, we just got fantastic fights. And then the main card was even better than the prelims and early prelims, which all of us were worried about. We were like, is it even going to be able to live up to it? Yes, it was, and then some. So I have to say UFC 281 for me was definitely the card of the year.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal pick. It really, really is a good choice. Brilliant fight night. Some of the best fights of the year right next to each other. I mean, it is a very, very obvious choice, and for very good reason as well. I'm going to go for the other obvious pick, which is UFC Fight Night London, Volkov v Aspinall. I know that's the one Jack thought we had on lock, and the reason that I have to pick that is mostly because of the crowd as well. I think 281 was phenomenal. MSG's always special. There's never any doubting that. But just the passion of the crowd in London was genuinely phenomenal. And no offense, but it was second to none. It really was. And the reason it was so good is, as we've said many times, you get a real football crowd at all events in the UK. And UFC London did not disappoint. Now, the second one was a bit more of a disappointment, but the first one, they blew the roof off the O2 all night. Nearly every fight, I think, was a finish. Molly McCann had that bloody spinning elbow that she's been living off for the last year. Paddy Pimblett did his thing as well. And Tom Aspinall, a star was born in heavyweight, absolutely mauled Alexander Volkov. Phenomenal fight. Phenomenal submission as well, actually. And yeah, all around a brilliant card. I'm curious to see where Jack's at. I have a feeling I think I know where it is, but honorable mention for UFC London.
Yeah, so I mean, those are the two picks I think you have to go. It's either London or 281. And I thought for sure, nothing could top UFC London because UFC London was amazing. I mean, top to bottom, it was perfect. And then 281 happened. And that's why I have to go with 281 because I think 281 stepped it up just by a little bit because the fights were equally as good. But 281, I keep going back to this. There were 2 championship fights on there, and there was more stakes on 281. Plus, same amount of finishes, same amount of everything. Every single fight was good. I don't know if the year before this, I mean, there were some good cards, but I don't know if there was 2 perfect cards. Right. I don't know if I can't remember really a perfect card since UFC 217, I think, which was GSP Bisping, and that was a perfect card.
Yarbrandt Cruz.
and
Oh
then
yeah,
and
that
then
was a good one.
Joanna versus Rose, which was the first one, which was
Oh,
unbelievable. Like that card was perfect.
yeah.
And I don't think we've had a card that was perfect, and that was 2017. I think we've had a card that was perfect since then. But this year we got two perfect cards, guys, and for the first time ever, a perfect fight night. And just the one thing that could top it was 281. For all the reasons Hunter already said, the stakes. If I had to also describe this year in a word, it would be comeback, because we saw three comebacks this year in title fights. We never even see usually one major title fight comeback. We saw three this year. And in Yuri Prohajka, in obviously Leon Edwards, and in 281, Alex Pereira
Yeah.
knocking out Israel Adesanya in the last round. Unreal card, unbelievable. Arguably, another fight of the year contender was on that card as well, between Dustin Poirier and Michael Chandler. That one deserves to be shouted out because it was incredible. Um, like you guys said, one of the best women's title fights the whole year, and Carla Esparza versus Zhang Wei Li. It's got to be 281 for me, guys. But massive shout out to UFC London though, because that was incredible too. And I thought that was going to be fight card of the year for sure, but it wasn't. Okay, well, we got two categories left, and we'll save fighter of the year for last. So we'll go ahead and we'll do our personal podcast award, right? For who was our favorite guest? What was our favorite podcast of the year? Hunter, who is that for you?
For me, oh my God. First of all, narrowing this down
I
was
know.
so difficult. I was sitting there just I was like, oh man,
Yeah.
this guest was awesome, but this guest was awesome. Honestly, I have to say all the guests we have on are always fantastic. But for me this year, it had to be with Coach Eric Nixick. I thought it was just incredibly insightful in what he was saying and the way he was saying it to us. It felt like I was automatically one of the bros just sitting on the couch talking to coach after one of the fights. And he's given us some of those insider secrets. If you guys haven't seen the episode already, I would highly suggest going back and watching it. This was right after Francis Ngannou won the title, or not won the title, but defended the title against Cyril Gane. And we got to see some wrestling from Ngannou. And so we picked his brain about the wrestling of Ngannou and how he's always had that coming and preparing. Eric Nixick was by far one of my favorite guests we've ever had on. So thank you for coming on, Eric, and I hope we have you on again.
Yeah, absolutely. Great pick. I actually think there may be something in the pipeline in that. That's all I'm saying. Not saying anything more. Just saying. Yeah, Hunter, brilliant pick. And by the way, I'd just like to echo Hunter's sentiments there. This is one of my favorite awards that we give out because obviously it's us, it's the guys, it's our guests that we have on. And to be clear, every single guest we have on, I love having on people who take times out of their days, out of their jobs, out of their lives, with their families, whatever it is they do. They all are very, very valued, and we all appreciate every single one of them, from Only Dans to all the others. You know, I think that might be my nickname of the year, I have to say. But I was thinking about this, and I'm completely split between two, and there's no way I could have split them. So I'm just going to give you both of them, and the people can decide. Um, my first was Coach Chartier,
Yeah.
Tyson Chartier from the New England Cartel. And the reason why, obviously, aside from being a great guy, which he is, and a very, very good supporter of the podcast, which we appreciate a ton, just so insightful. You know, really, really cool to hear about the runnings of the New England Cartel, how much he cares for his guys in the gym, how it runs, how it operates. And basically, that sort of family feel when they go to fight cards, when they go to Vegas, hearing about the likes of Rob Font and obviously Calvin Cater, and it was just a brilliant episode. A bit like what Hunter said with Coach Nixick. Just felt like he was shooting the shit with the guys basically. And that's generally the best environment you can have, you know. By the way, honorable shout out to Coach Nixick as well. I know I wasn't here for that episode, but I have had the honor of meeting him in person, and I know exactly what Hunter's talking about. So absolutely correct there. My second pick is Mike Pulver, the head of
Mm.
Cage Titans. Aside from being compared to a serial killer, it was a phenomenal episode. Again, just insightful, really nice, really welcoming, took the time with us and made us feel like one of the guys, basically, you know, just like he was one of everybody else. Obviously, Cage Titans, they're such an up and coming brand. They're the biggest promotion in New England, which is one of my favorite parts of the world personally. Just a really great guy, you know, He was very hospitable, very insightful, and all around just a brilliant episode that, I mean, I think it was actually one of our longest episodes that we've had, and it felt like it went by like that. So Tyson Chartier and Mike Pulvier, thank you both very much. You're both my pick for guest of the year, and I really hope we have you both on again soon.
Yeah, I love that. I love those shouts. I mean, you can't go wrong. And I just want to say thank you to all of the guests that we had on because we loved every single one of the. I don't think we did. There wasn't one guest we had on that we didn't have an absolute blast with. There wasn't
Yeah.
like every guest we had on, we were talking about like just how awesome it was and how thankful we are that we were able to do the podcast with them. Um, for me, I'm gonna go a little bit outside the box here as well. And Keelan mentioned him the best nickname that we had on. I'm gonna have Dan Walsh. I know Dan Walsh is still like an amateur fighter and not the biggest name, but I don't think you could talk to a more genuine guy. He was seriously like so willing to do it and so nice throughout the whole podcast. And we had a really good conversation. We went from, kind of a standard interview type question to us just kind of talking to each other. And like you guys said with those other coaches, I felt that same thing with Dan Walsh. And we're rooting for him throughout his whole career. And it's also fun because we were able to build through guests like Dan Walsh and Mike Pulver, and Joe Giannetti as well. Shout out him. We were able to build a nice connection to Cage Titans, which was fun as well. And so we were able to have a lot of access to those fighters, and all those fighters are awesome. We're all rooting for them. And so yeah, it was a great year for guests. Reese Watkins was also earlier this year. He was phenomenal. I think we did
Baby
Julian Lane.
Goose.
Yeah, there was just we just
I got to shout out
yeah.
Kendra Lust as well, of
Ken,
course.
of course, Kendra Lust. I can't even believe that happened this year. Um,
I still can't.
it was crazy, and just Jack Shore, Cody Durden, some of the OGs, like, we were
Hogaback.
listening. Yeah,
Hoga back.
Hoga back,
Love Hoga back.
one of our favorite. Dre Miley,
Ray
which
Miley. You kidding me?
said on.
Terrence McKinney.
Terrence McGee, guys, we're listing so many, and I'm so blessed to do this with you guys, and it's fun, and shout out to everybody that came on because all of you were phenomenal guests. And with that, we have one more award, guys, until the year in review episode is concluded. And that final award is Fighter of the Year. Who gets the ultimate award, Hunter, for you?
For me, I think this is an obvious pick, but I'm going to go with Alexander Volkanovski. I think capturing that number one pound for pound spot while also not losing a round to anyone he fought this year, those including the Korean Zombie, who is a very tricky fighter, and of course, one of the greatest featherweights of all time, if not the greatest, Max Holloway. To be able to go in there and win every single round against one of the greatest champions we've ever seen is a whole nother era of greatness that we're going to be able to be blessed to see. Alexander Volkanovski, as we all know, is fighting Islam Makhachev soon in February. It's going to be a tough fight, but if he can win that fight, I think he's really going to cement how great he truly is in this sport. So for this year, I'm going to have to definitely go with Alexander the Great.
Yeah, this is one of my other favorite awards that we give out, and I think if there were any other person apart from the person I'm about to name, it would be unanimous for Volkanovski because the guy is phenomenal. He is so gifted, and the year that he's had, fighters dream of having, a year like that their entire lives, and he's had this in 2022. So Volkanovski's a more than worthy winner if that is who your fighter of the year is. Mine isn't Volkanovski. I'm going a little left field, and the person that I'm going to say is the MMA Island podcast fighter of the year, and I would really like to win this award as well, is Alex Pereira. And the reason it's Alex Pereira, there's one big reason. At the start of this year, everybody knew Volkanovski would probably hold gold at some point and he would be a champion. I don't think that's an outlandish statement to make. In all honesty, who thought Pereira would even be in the title picture by the end of this year, let alone the champion, let alone how he won the title, let alone haunting his greatest rival across two different sports to do it? When you consider the narrative, when you consider the most dominant champion since Anderson Silva, and it takes a ghost from his past, a banshee, if you will, to come to this sport and dethrone the king. in the fifth round with such a violent knockout. A kickboxer who really doesn't have any ground game at all, who got taken down, who still survived to the fifth round, put it on the champion, and is now the champion. I don't think there's a better story than that. He might not be the best mixed martial artist, but he is the best title winning story. For me, Poitchan rules.
That's a great pick. And I know most of the major MMA organizations were picking him because of that reason that you just said. And it's hard to argue with that. But once again, I'm going to agree with Hunter. I think it has to be Volkanovski. And I think it's because while Alex Pereira did do the impossible, and I still, you're saying the words, I don't believe you still, even though it happened. Like, I still
I
think
feel
you're
like I'm
lying
lying to
I, I,
myself.
I, I still don't believe it. But for me, Alexander Volkanovski, the reason I give it to him is just because he, this year, I feel like, has become the complete fighter. He has become the evolved version of Volkanovski that is really the last hope from Islam Makhachev domination at lightweight, not even in his own weight class. And the reason I give him fighter of the year comes down to one fight, and it's Max Holloway. Not only did he beat just Max Holloway in general, right? Because Max Holloway in general, no one beats Max Holloway for the most part, except for Volkanovski. He dominated him. Max Holloway didn't win one round and was busted up. Um, and to do that against the guy who I thought Max was going to win that fight going in, considering what we had seen Max do to Volkanovski, I thought Max won the second fight. I still think he won the second fight. And how close those first two fights were, there was no way Volkanovski would dominate Max Holloway, but he did. And he shocked me. And dominating Max Holloway like that, and also the Korean Zombie, because, you know, like the Korean Zombie, we expected Volkanovski to win, but no one does that to Korean Zombie. And even Brian Ortega dominated the Korean Zombie, but it wasn't like that. The way that that Volkanovski beat the Korean Zombie was perfection, and he TKO'd him. The only reason that he didn't go down was that he's the Korean Zombie. He doesn't go down. He keeps going forward, you know. Um, and how Max Holloway didn't get dropped in that fight, I don't know. So for me, this year was just perfection for Alexander Volkanovski. No, I didn't see any holes in his game at all. He's got to be fight of the year for me.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm gonna be totally honest. I have no complaints whatsoever about Volkanovski. I still think the argument's there for Pereira,
Oh yeah.
just solely because of how he dethroned Israel Adesanya. But if we're talking the complete fighter, someone who is going to be in GOAT status inevitably, I have no arguments whatsoever. And Alex Volkanovski is an entirely deserving fighter of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that wraps it up, guys. That's it for the year. That's what you guys have been waiting for, the year in review podcast. So that's it for 2022. We'll see you next year, guys. First episode is going to be our fantasy MMA draft. That's going to be the first episode of the new year. So we're starting off with a bang. As always, make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. We're not going anywhere. You can listen to us everywhere, literally everywhere, including iTunes and Spotify. Follow us on Instagram at mma.island.podcast. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening. Looking forward to 2023.
Thank you guys. Thanks for all your support.
Yeah, listen,